And yeah, so we're just going to start. The purpose of this webinar is to discuss radon during real estate discussions, just how and why, and we want to get your help with developing a toolkit that we can use for the various individuals that will be talking about radon during the situation when people are buying and selling property. We'll go a little bit into the international picture and let you know a little bit about what some of the other countries are doing. We'll talk about some recommended options that we've come up with. So we've been talking about radon and real estate for a number of years now, for a couple of years, and we've boiled it down to kind of 3 main options that we've identified. And then we've got some tools that we've developed for real estate, and we would like some of your input on them. And so we'll go through those and get you to give us some of your feedback on it. All right, so why real estate? Why are we talking about that? In our discussions on real estate, it's been very obvious that this is the time when homeowners are thinking about their home. So we know that we're building awareness in Canada. We're increasing engagement with people testing, but we do need to make sure people make more of a priority of fixing their home. So regardless of how many people we get to test their home, we really aren't reducing the risk from radon unless those people with high levels are fixing. And so we do think that when people are looking at buying a new home, it is a great time for them to start thinking about radon and investigating it. But we also think that it's a prime time for them to actually engage in fixing it. And so we think that the reason this is because they're attentive. We've got so many things that are vying for our attention these days that when we are buying a house, we're at the most attentive time for focus. So people are doing research, they're digging in, they're spending more time at this point of their lives to really learn about different features of their house than they are in other times of their day or their lives or their year. Also, it's a prime time when they're prioritizing spending. So they're looking at different features of a house and trying to decide where they're going to be spending money on. And so this may change, after they move into the house, but we do think that this is a key time when they're prioritizing their spending, and they're investigating issues, and it's sort of setting some of their priorities. And real estate. We know that real estate agents are people that homeowners trust. And so this is an important connection for us to reach out to real estate agents to say, hey, look, we know homeowners trust you. And on the flip side, we feel that real estate agents really need to have clear information for home buyers. And it's important for them to have accurate information and make sure that we give them the tools for the discussions that they're going to have with home buyers. Okay, so prioritizing. So because when they're purchasing homes, they're starting to think about a house. We've kind of put together a bit of a scenario of a hypothetical house. And so we started with this situation where we've got a house that is, let's say the roof is 10 years old, and to replace the roof, it's going to be at least $5,000 or more. And then the furnace, it's got a high efficiency gas furnace. It's 3 years old. To replace it, it might be $3,000 or more, but we also know that 3 years is fairly new in the life cycle of a furnace. It has older windows, and so this might be something that they want to replace. And so they're starting to think about how much money it might cost to replace their windows. Then, this house hypothetically has a pool, which is sort of a special feature. And So they're looking at annual maintenance costs of the pool. If it's the winter time, they might not know if the pool needs servicing. So they may, you know, there might be a bit of a question mark there that there might be some repairs or something to the pool. If it's the summertime, then it might be clear and they might understand that. Also the hot water tank. So it's 8 years old. We know it's approximately $800 or more to fix, and so this also might be something that they're starting to consider. So as they're looking at the homes, they're kind of creating at this checklist of things, features of the house, they're creating a bit of a priority list. And so we've sort of put this together to identify their priorities. So if it's the roof, like we said, it still has a few more years, so it's a lower priority. High efficiency gas furnace, that's a low priority. It still has many more years. The windows to replace, medium priority. It's not a health concern, but they're older, and so this is something that people are focused on. They may look at when they're buying a house and say, okay, it costs $10,000 to replace them all, but then they may move in and then make some other decisions about how much to spend. Again, a pool starts to talk about maintenance, and then the water tank too is a higher priority because it's going to need to be addressed. And so really our goal is to now put radon here into this list, and so we want them to think about this in their list of priorities, that okay, does it have a radon mitigation system? Does it not? If it doesn't, then we need to set aside some money to make sure that we fix it. It is a health concern, and so we do want them to assess it as a high priority. So this is why we're talking about radon in respect to real estate. And so we sort of took a look at what other countries are doing, and this is a bit of a snapshot. So just to be clear, I reached out to some of our partners that are working in the industry, and to try and find out what really is happening in your country with regards to real estate. And so a couple people, there was a little bit different answers from different countries, but this seemed to be kind of a quick summary of what was typically happening. So we know the US, the short-term tests are minimum 48 hours. Their real estate testing is mandatory in some states, which means that if there isn't a mitigation system already installed in the house, in order to sell the house, a real estate transaction needs to be or real estate test needs to be included as part of the transaction. And so that is mandatory in some states. In the UK, there are, they've sort of listed affected area, or they've designated certain affected areas, so that does affect some of the rules. Typically, what they're doing is they're asking for a long-term radon test report. If there has been no report, then they're advising to discuss retention with the lawyer. There are a little bit of regional things that are a little bit different, but typically that seems to be what's happening in the UK. In Sweden, they also are looking for a radon test report. They do have a time length of within 5 years. So if it's current within 5 years, then they're taking the report as the basis for whether a mitigation system is needed or not. If not, if there is no report, then the recommendation is to do a long-term test after the sale. So once the new owner moves into the house, they would conduct a long-term test, and there would be a clause in the sales contract for this. And there would be possibly a short-term indicator test prior to the sale that would be followed up with a long-term test after the sale. And in Norway, there would be a long-term test report. And here too, it would be a minimum of 2 months. I think I forgot, in Sweden, it would be a minimum of 3 months. In Norway, it's a minimum of 2 months, but they actually specify the duration, or the months that the test is being conducted in. And so they're looking for it to be conducted between October and March. If it's out of that time frame, then it's considered not a valid test. So they're specifically looking for a long-term test that's conducted in the winter months. Okay, so, sorry. in Canada, we're looking at 3 options. So we've kind of put together option A, B, and C to sort of give an idea of some of the things that we're thinking about for how to deal with radon with real estate in Canada. So option A is that the individual who is considering maybe they're going to sell their house would first test using a long-term test. If needed, then they would fix it, and then they would put their house up for sale. Or option B would be that the homeowner would buy a house, and then once they move in, then they would test with a long-term test, and then they would fix. Or option C would be an indicator, using a radon indicator or a test during real estate transaction to sort of get an assessment of whether a mitigation system might be needed, and then money set aside for escrow. Okay, so I'll just kind of dig into a little bit about option A, some of the advantages of it. It's proactive, so homeowner is sort of considering the fact that they're caring about the future residents that are going to be in the house, and they want their house to be best. I mean, often people want their house to look the best, and really, this would mean they want it to be the healthiest option, and it would provide a healthy house for future owners. It would give the seller peace of mind that they've solved this before they pass the house on to a new owner. The disadvantages of this option is that it would be the return on investment would be low until the buyers realize that the radon is an issue. So people may not value it if they have no idea what radon is, and therefore too also they might not differentiate between a house that is mitigated or a house that's not mitigated and really understand that one is better than the other. The other disadvantage is that it is possible, if they are just testing to say this house has low radon and you don't need a mitigation test, there could be opportunity of interference for a test. Option B, buy the house and then test once you move in, and then fix it. So the advantages of this setup is people living in the house and investing in the house are making the decision for themselves. Other advantage is still that it would still fix it now for any of the future occupants. So for them, they themselves that are now just moving in and going to be living in the house, but eventually likely they're going to sell and then pass it on to somebody else. And so once it's fixed for the future. Another advantage is that they will be invested to make sure that the test is conducted properly. A disadvantage is that they may not have money available to cover mitigation after they purchase the house, especially if it's a first-time home buyer and their money is tied up in just getting a deposit. They may not have funds available to put into it. They may also look and think that they should have a reduction in the sale price if there is no mitigation system, and so this doesn't allow an option for them to get that. Another disadvantage is that it may be a priority to them when they're looking at buying the house, but once they move in, they may get distracted and forget, and so it may not be as a higher priority once they move in. So one quick clause to deal with this is that this could be achieved through a mortgage plus. And so we've been talking with real estate agents, and one of our real estate agents here in Manitoba that's also working with us on the policy advisory board. This was one suggestion that he put out. It could be dealt with through a mortgage plus option, and so this is done with other areas, that there would be a certain amount of money that would be added onto the mortgage, but it would be held specifically for a directed purpose. And so in this situation, it would be only used specifically for remediation based on a long-term test. And then if a long-term test comes back at acceptable levels, then the money would just go back to the principal of the mortgage and would be applied without penalty. So this option would give a buyer access to the funds. It would be a little over and above what they've committed to borrow, but it would be specifically directed for the purchase. But then they again, if they didn't need the money now, it lessens the amount that they've needed to borrow. Okay, now just before I kind of go into the plus and minuses of option C, we thought we would give you a little bit of background about why did we start talking about option C. So one reason was real estate agents were looking at ways to protect their buyers. So they were looking for a real estate transaction test, just like they do with other air quality issues or other things when they're assessing a house. They were looking for a way to determine the radon level during the transaction, the home inspection. Also, obviously, living close to the U.S., the fact that the U.S. has a 48-hour real estate test, this definitely is a spillover of information to Canadians, and so this certainly did play into it. Also, there was a bit of lack of clarity and guidelines in the process, and so we have seen that this already has led to litigation. So just having an open system where each inspector kind of decides what the process is going to look like. We're definitely seeing that there's lack of clarity, and so if we could get some structure for them, it just seemed like it would be helpful. And home inspectors really are looking for this. They want to follow a proper, well-developed standard, and we could rely on the U.S., but we're looking for something that's maybe a little bit higher standard than the options what the U.S. guidance has been giving us. Also, we have seen a little bit of unfair prejudice against a home because there's lack of guidance on the methodology. So things like where a test is done during a real estate transaction, then the buyer decides he doesn't want to buy the house because it has high radon and goes to purchase another house. There also has been situations where there's been money taken off the price of the house, but there's been no follow-up. So that there's been a test done during the real estate transaction. The negotiation happens to say, okay, you've got high radon, but you don't have a radon mitigation system. We're going to have to install this when we move in. So they're using the information to negotiate a lower price at the time of purchase, but then we're not seeing follow-up action where they actually do test and then install a mitigation system necessarily. So we thought there needs to be some clear guidance that this should be part of the end game. Okay, so what is option C? So this would be a short-term test, and right now we've kind of put it to a recommendation that it would be a minimum 4 days. If that radon test result is above 75 becquerels, that would then initiate putting money into escrow for a radon mitigation system. And then when the new owner moves in, they would conduct a long-term test during the first winter season. And then they would, if the test is high, the money would then be paid from escrow to install the radon mitigation system. So sorry, I should say high would be above 200. So if the long-term test is above 200 becquerels, then money would go towards the radon mitigation system. If the long-term test was below 200 becquerels, then the money would go back to the seller. The other thing this does do is it provides guidelines so that there's consistency of the process, that clarity too, that each person understands the process, and then there is also some guidance to prevent interference. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of this system, it's a conservative indicator level, so we're adding a new number into people's minds. Instead of using 200, we've chosen 75 based on a number of the research that we've looked at. And the reason we've picked this is to make sure that we protect public health. So try and prevent the number of false lows that somebody would test and the level would come back below 200, and then they think they're safe and they never test again. We really wanted to make sure that we protected that situation, so we picked a 75 becquerel indicator. Another advantage is that the radon mitigation system would actually be based on a long-term test. So the decision to mitigate still would be based on the long-term test. Another advantage is it would provide some structure for the realtor and for the purchaser, and really for the inspector as well, who wants to have a radon test conducted. One disadvantage is it does use a short-term test, which we know can vary from day to day and season to season. It still does provide an opportunity that something could be a false low reading. So there could be times when homes do test below the 75 becquerels, but really would have tested high on a long-term test. So there's still that possibility. Preventing interference really still isn't guaranteed, although we've included some information in about it. That's certainly still an option, possibility. And again, so because the testing is done by the seller, things could be manipulated to create the false low. Testing that's done by the buyer on the flip side could be a false high. So I guess we're just clarifying the interference options here. So it could be the seller is motivated to create a false low, but then when the mitigation system, the buyer might want a mitigation system, and so want to make sure that the test is done in such a way that ensures that they do get a mitigation system. And then also another disadvantage is it penalizes the seller. So they are the ones that would have to pay for the system, even though it's not something, or it would be, come out of the value that they could get from their house. So that is a disadvantage of it. Okay, so those are some of the options that we've been looking at. And so the other things that we're really looking for is we're wanting some help with developing some tools that we can put out for the real estate situation. And so on the left is sort of an infographic, and so we haven't developed it yet, and that's kind of one of the pieces of information that we're kind of going to get you guys to help us with. But we would like to get some information about what are the best quick facts that we can put out there when somebody's looking at a house that you think or that you found in your experiences really is helpful in engaging the public, a home buyer, into considering radon. And so we would put together an infographic. On the front would be some quick basic facts, and then on the back might be a little bit more detailed information. The middle piece is actually a longer pamphlet. So we have developed a longer pamphlet for those who, real estate agents who really want to dig in and do some investigation and have more information, or those homeowners who would like to take some more time to investigate. We have a longer pamphlet that we've been developing that has information about radon, more details about testing and why do we talk about long-term versus short-term. And then it also has information about mitigation and the various types. So the other thing we expect that we will start to see in the future is homes being sold with mitigation systems installed. And so we wanted to make sure we had information available for the home buyers and the real estate agents on the different types of mitigation systems that they might see. So we've also put some information in there about the radon rough-ins for new construction, about the extended rough-ins that we're mostly seeing in BC, about submembrane mitigation systems, as well as the typical active soil depressurization. So we've put some more detailed information into a pamphlet. And then we also have developed tools to try and help make mitigation systems understandable. So it's clear and understandable just exactly what is this and how does it work. And then the other thing that we wanted to include for in our tool is really information not just for the home buyer and the real estate agent, but we recognize that in this situation there may be mortgage lenders that are starting to see the word radon somewhere, and so helping them understand and have access to information that they might need, lawyers, insurance agents or companies. So also we wanted to keep in mind, what type of information would be helpful for them to have access to. Okay, so this is where, so we started developing kind of some quick ideas that we sort of thought we would put out, but we'd like some thoughts from you. So in what I've kind of done is in the middle screen here would be the title, so we were just going to call it Radon and Real Estate. And then the little 6 icons that are around the house in our little infographic on the left. We were going to put some quick facts about radon. So we weren't necessarily going to use the lines directed to the house, but we thought we would put little bubbles of information and little circular pictures so that we do have quick facts about radon. So we started to put out a couple things, but I'm curious about what facts would you want to see included on this infographic. We've included 3. Radon gas is present in every home, so we might have a little circle with radon, either the RN or something like that in it. Another little quick fact would be living in a home with elevated radon levels causes lung cancer, and so maybe a little circle with a lung in it. Another quick fact would be testing your home is inexpensive and easy. And so I'm curious for those that have some ideas, what types of things would you like to see on that infographic? Maybe just take a minute here to type in your thoughts. And I see we've got some questions, and I'll go back to kind of address some of those questions. And then we've also got, yeah, one good one. If levels are high, are found, it can be fixed. That's a really great one, making sure that people right away know that it is a problem, but there is a simple fix for it. Yep, another one, you can reduce your risk of lung cancer by mitigating your home. Really great one that's clear, understanding that what the risk is and that it can be fixed again. Protect your children, good one. So really focusing on the fact that you want to protect your family, and this is definitely your home. Home is one of the places you think about for protecting your family. Good, so I'll let you kind of keep coming in with some of those thoughts. The other thing you can start to think about is some of the facts on the bottom. So in the bottom of the infographic is a green band. And so we were going to put 3 graphs in the bottom there. And so I put those suggestions on the far right column of the screen. And so these are the things that we thought we would put graphically, that 3,200 people are dying of radon-induced lung cancer across Canada. Another graph would be the average number of homes that are above guideline. And then a third suggestion we had was maybe a cost comparison chart. And so I'm curious about that too. If we were to do a cost comparison chart, we've suggested putting in the roof, windows, and radon. What do you think of those price points? Is that realistic price points? And what do you think about the options? Do you have something better? This might be something that regionally we need to change too. Maybe one province might be more focused on one type of heating system, and so the furnace would be better. Another province might be more focused on something different, typically that they're seeing homeowners as a priority. So I'm curious about what you think we should include in those charts. One of the other points, yeah, verifying radon levels can be found in the same neighborhood. Everyone should test, that's right. So making sure people realize that if their neighbor has low levels, or that they still need to test their house because this house could be high. That's one reason also we haven't gone to a map on this infographic to sort of say how many percentages in a certain area of homes are above level, because we do want to be clear that every area could have high levels. Heat pumps. So Jeff's talking about in New Brunswick that they're using heat pumps for 3,000 to 4,000, and so yeah, that would be a great cost comparison for that area. I think BC often uses heat pumps too, so that might work well for BC. Yeah, a clear statement on there, just the only way to know is to test for radon. Good, so continue to kind of put in, I'm gonna go and just kind of talk a little bit more about the reverse side. So continue to give us some thoughts or type in any of the things that you think that would be good for the front. When we flip it over on the back, we thought we would have a little bit more information. And so here too, we thought we'd dig in a little bit more about testing and so we sort of had some thoughts about making sure people understand where to purchase or where to go to find a test. The idea that they should be testing for 91 days or longer, test in your bedroom or your family room, or how can we say, you know, just give them some direction quickly on where to test. That's clear, understandable for somebody when they're, you know, just thinking about, okay, how do I go about this testing when I do move in and it's time to test. And then also some clear information about mitigation. And so the fact that it's inexpensive to run, so it's not going to add a large amount to their monthly heating or monthly electricity bill. That it's a simple system, but it needs to be installed properly. Encourage people to look for a certified professional when they do want to install the mitigation system. Some research from Health Canada about the effectiveness of it. We could put that in there, or also the fact that it does other things other than reduce radon. We have seen reduction in basement humidity, improvement in indoor air quality, also other reduction of soil gases. So let us know what kinds of information do you think we should include on the reverse. That would be really helpful. I'm curious about one of the points for where to test in the lowest lived-in level. When we talk about the lowest level, people get confused about what the level means. So I've had a few people trying to say, well, that means that that's on the floor of the room. And so just trying to see what is there anything that is confusing people would probably also be helpful to know, that if you found when you've used this statement that people just don't get it, so you've switched and you've decided to use this, you know, another statement instead, that would be really helpful to know. Another good statement: mitigating your home does not only reduce radon, but it improves general indoor air quality. Yeah, that's a really good, clear one. People understand indoor air quality. And so you can keep chatting in. Also, I will say, you know, we want you to keep thinking about this. So we will post this slideshow online and send you a kind of a follow-up email after the webinar. So, you know, if you keep thinking about these things, because we do want to engage with you and get your feedback on your experiences, because you are talking about radon with homeowners, and we really know that as you're having those conversations, you're learning different ways to communicate with them. And so it would be really helpful for us to get some of that information. Another part of the toolkit is just clear information about mitigation systems, so that we can get this out to homeowners when especially if they're looking at a house that already has a mitigation system in, to understand what it's doing for them. Or if they're, you know, we're talking about installing it, just making sure that they understand what's involved with the installation of a mitigation system. So we have developed, CNRPP has developed labels to make sure that that goes on the system. That's really important for if one homeowner installs a mitigation system and then a new homeowner moves in, has no idea what it is, to make sure that there is good, clear labels on the components of the radon mitigation system, to make sure that the pipe isn't cut or disconnected, to make sure that the fan isn't turned off or unplugged, or other parts of the components also aren't affected. And so we do have those labels. And then we also have some different information pieces. And so this is sort of some of the different examples. We've got a postcard type that's on the left that has front and back and talks a little bit about radon mitigation systems. We have a little infographic that's kind of designed just to clearly help people understand what the different aspects are, including, you know, some of the under slab stuff that they might not see. And then we've got a longer piece. The one on the right is sort of a full page diagram, which is really clear. And so to be able to sort of explain how a radon mitigation system works, it's a one-pager, and we have those developed so far for an active soil depressurization system, as well as the rough-in, the radon rough-in, so that we can talk about the fact that there's this pipe in your basement, and this is what it's for. We also are working on one that is for crawl space, so it kind of shows people what it looks like when a crawl space situation, and then also through the roof. So this one is a side discharge, but we've also got one that goes through the roof. And I think that's it. And then, yeah, so I'm just going to go through. I know there was a few questions. So I'm going to go backwards a little bit to answer some of the questions. I know one question was about why did we use the 75 becquerel indicator? And this really came out of research from Dan Speck that he has done in the US, and both in looking at his research, but also having a dialogue discussion with him. So he's been working in the US for many years, and he's been a key researcher there. And based on the statistics of at what point of level would we use to reduce the percentage of false lows, you know, where do we draw that line? And so there is some discussion. So one of the recommendations was that 75 would be used during the winter season, and then 50 becquerels would be used during the summer, because we definitely are seeing lower levels in the summer than we are in the winter. So that was one thing that was discussed. I think the idea of the committee at the time was that having two different, a summer and a winter level, was a little bit confusing, and so we should just kind of pick one and set it at one. But yeah, that's a bit of the background on why we picked 75 becquerels, was based on his research. Another question was, is there a push by provincial, federal, or other bodies to bring in legislation for testing? I know there has been discussion about this, but I can't say that I've seen any province right now that is analyzing it. I think right now, one of the things provinces or legislatures are focused on is the childcare issue, testing in childcare centers, and then also testing in schools. And there definitely has been discussion about including policies for radon testing in real estate, but I'm not aware that there is any serious consideration in any of the provinces by the legislatures or legislators. One of the other, so Peter, talking about the sampling bias issues, using a third-party radon monitoring professional for testing definitely eliminates some of those concerns for bias. And so we didn't kind of talk about that in some of the plus and minuses, but that definitely is something that is an important aspect. And I think I've heard that raised by both real estate professionals, that they would want to see that a third party, a non-biased party doing the testing is a priority for them as well. And I guess that's another reason why having, you know, a clear methodology to make sure that if you've got one person, even within the province, doing testing one way, and then you've got somebody doing something different. So we wanted to sort of say, okay, look, if we're going to do it, let's make sure that we're doing it all the same so that our professionals are doing it consistently as well. All right, so the other question I have is just what other pieces of information do you think that we should develop? So we talked about, I've talked about an infograph, I've talked about more detailed information, and then clear mitigation tools. But is there other things that you've either seen or that you think that we should be considering developing for either homeowners or real estate agents that would be useful? One piece that I know one of the province, the real estate associations has developed is wording so that if it were to be included in escrow, they've sort of already got vetted some legal wording to use. So that could be something that we look at. So we get that wording available so that people just already know kind of if you're going to write it into a contract, this is the way to use it, or this is the way to word it. Really good point, Paul. Also talking about retesting, and so right now our guidance with Health Canada is that if a system is installed in a house, that the homeowner should retest every 5 years. And so that is a fact that realtors should know, or that homeowners should know, that if they move into a house that has a radon mitigation system, that they should be monitoring it, making sure that it's still effective, doing a test every 5 years. Actually, while we're on this point, I think one of the other things, I was watching a presentation by a psychologist that was talking about retesting, and his recommendation was that we should be doing regular testing even without a mitigation system. So the fact that radon levels can change, that we have this recommendation for when a mitigation system is installed, but we actually should also have the same recommendation for a home that doesn't have a mitigation system, because it can vary year to year, or things can change to increase it. So that's another point that I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on. Yeah, pathways definitely can change. So either the soil pathways or the foundation of the house, right? Things can change, so that can mean a home can have higher radon levels in 5 years' time than it is today. So I do think we should be encouraging all homeowners to test every 5 years. All right, and so we wanted to kind of take time to just remind you that we do have the CARST conference coming up. So if you haven't registered for that yet, you can go online and see the schedule is pretty much set, and we've got the information about the upcoming conference there. So online it's at www.carst.ca/CARST2018. And we've got a field trip on the Saturday, which would give our certified professionals would give you 8 continuing education credits, so CMIP approved credits. And so we've got 3 options. The commercial one right now is full, so really 2 options left that you can register for. One is a half-day tour of the National Research Council's radon research facilities, and so they've got some great work that they're doing, and they've offered to invite us in and give us a tour of the work that they're doing, so you can kind of get right on site and hear Grace from NRC talk about the work they're doing, and she is a really, really engaging person to listen to, so it should be a great site visit. And then the other half day would be work with Colin Dumais on site in the radon mitigation system. He's going to kind of go through the new CGSB standard and a house with an existing mitigation system, and just sort of explain the difference between how we would install it under the CGSB standard. And then the third option is a bilingual option. So for those who are more comfortable in French, Marcel Bracobé is going to do a full radon mitigation system. So that would be a full day field trip right on site with him to walk through a mitigation system. And then on the Sunday, we will have, and the courses are up online, and we do have our CE classroom courses. So we've got a speaker coming in to talk about radon mitigation, but from a soil vapor intrusion perspective. And so most of our professionals have learned how to mitigate for radon, but did you know you can also use the same methods to mitigate for other soil gases? And so he's going to kind of give us an insight into other soil gas industry and what they're doing, and how you might be able to transition and work in other areas. We also have commercial courses, so developing proposals for work in a commercial setting, just understanding what all goes into getting into the commercial market. So Maureen Wood and Andrew Wood are going to talk about that. Also health and safety courses, hazardous materials. Scott Cryer is going to talk about hazardous materials for our mitigation professionals. So we really want to make sure it's a priority for them to protect themselves. So we've got a presentation on that. And then Mark Donahue is going to do the same presentation in French. And then Marcel is going to do the same with water mitigation. So he'll talk a bit about radon in water and how to mitigate that. So he'll do one presentation in English and then a presentation in French. And then we do have our emerging technology. So we've got a couple speakers coming in talking about their new products. And Kurt Lamontagne is going to talk about large building testing. So just some different aspects of it as well. So I think that's all our courses. So we've got a really good, and Kafka, they're going to come and talk about radon barriers. So if you're interested in how those work, they're going to do a CE course on spray foam and just sort of help our mitigation professionals just understand the different aspects of how it's installed and the benefits of radon control system with spray foam. So those are our Sunday CE courses, and then we've got some really great presentations coming on Monday and Tuesday. So that's our conference. Also, I wanted to remind you, and it's on information on our website about the radon mitigation sweepstakes. So we still have prizes up. We sent an email out about how the provinces are comparing. We've got definitely our prairie provinces are full steam ahead. They've got the most contest entries. So those in Ontario and BC and the Maritimes, you might want to get some more information out there. Make sure you've contacting your past customers to let them know that they can be open to entering this contest and win back $1,000 on their mitigation. And also don't forget the resources. The other resources, we're talking specifically about some of them here today, but there are other resources, so you can go online and find specific workplace resources, specific ones for childcare centers. So we've got an information pamphlet available for them, as well as a poster and little postcards. Again, we've got mitigation labels. We've got just some general postcard information, and then we also have a measurement label. So go online and check that out to see what other resources. We'll send those to you as well. So, and then any other questions? I see a couple more that have come up, so I'll quickly go through those. So Mike talks about with something that doesn't force realtors to represent their buying clients, they will avoid radon. And so the fact that there isn't legislation may mean that realtors aren't engaged. Yeah, so there is a disclosure, and I should have had the list of provinces. So I know Manitoba, Nova Scotia. I don't know if anyone knows which other provinces have radon listed on the disclosure statement. I believe New Brunswick also has radon listed on the disclosure statement. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Prince Edward Island, I don't think. Oh yes, Quebec as well. How about BC? Paul or Hardy, do you know in BC, is it included on the property disclosure statement? No, not in BC yet. I think it is in Alberta. Mike, have you looked at the property disclosure statement in Alberta? Do you know if it's included there? Yeah, I'm not sure. In Alberta, in Saskatchewan, actually, I think it is. Yeah. So Bruce talks about the fact that even if they're not required to disclose radon specifically, if they know and they don't disclose, they could be culpable by law, so they could be liable. So that is another issue. And I have talked to different real estate agents to see if we can't get some clarity on that information. Although I think they've often just referred me to lawyers. And so this might be. We also will have a lawyer is coming to the conference and doing a presentation on different legal liabilities. So this may be a good question for him to talk about what's the legal liability from a buyer. Yeah, so there is some concern too about that if people are concerned about their liability, then they may just not bother testing. And so another reason why it would be helpful to have some legislation on it. Although I think, yeah, right. I mean, right now our promotion for the home buyer purchasing, testing, and after they've moved in, really focuses the responsibility on them, that they are testing and fixing for their own concern. But yeah, so there is lots of legal implications when we start to dig into set standards and policies that we need to know about. All right, and we're just coming up on the hour. So if you do have any questions, you haven't been able to ask them on the chat, or then we still would like to hear from you. So send us an email at info@carst.ca, or come to the conference and we will do a presentation. So we're going to take this information, we're going to go out. We've got we'll hopefully work here in Manitoba with the real estate agents in the next couple of weeks and sort of get some of their feedback. We've also worked with New Brunswick and kind of talked with them a little bit about some of the things that they would need. And so we will hopefully get this all ready and then present the finished product to you at the conference. So come and join us then, and you'll see it. So really appreciate the time that you guys have spent with us this morning or this afternoon. Have a great day.